Welcome to another video. In this one we'll be looking at English literature. This is another one of my ultimate guides, and I believe this to be the best guide you can ever get for paper 1 and paper 2 of iGCSE English literature, specifically for Edexcel. So first of all, let's look at the important details of paper 1. First of all, as usual, comes the code of the paper, which is 4ET1/01. The code is not extremely crucial or something in the sense that you can't pass by knowing this detail, but it's still important since you have to be aware of what your paper is called. And next, this paper is for 90 marks in total, and it constitutes for 60% of the entire iGCSE. After this, the timing of the paper is 2 hours long, so this is a longer paper than usual, longer than most other papers for other subjects, but you have to write a lot as well, so you still have to manage your time properly. Next and lastly comes the name of the paper, which is Poetry and Modern Prose. Okay, so after this, let's just get into the sections of this paper. They're broken down into 3 sections, and we'll look at each of them in detail. So first of all, there is section A. This one assesses your unseen poetry skills, and it's for 20 marks. Then comes section B, which assesses anthology poetry from a choice of 2. So anthology poetry is this book over here, which consists of 16 to 20 different poems. And so you have to assess anthology poetry from a choice of 2 questions. That's section B, and it's for 30 marks, slightly more than the first section, as you can see. Lastly comes section C, which assesses 1 modern prose text from a choice of 5. And this one is also slightly more than the previous section, 40 marks. So a modern prose text, I'm going to tell you later on in this video what it is and which one I did. But the main thing you need to remember is that there's a choice of 5 modern prose texts, and your school will be doing 1 from these 5. So it depends on the school you go to, which modern prose text you're doing. These are usually something like novels and stuff. We'll come to that later. So for now, these are the 3 sections, section A, B, C, 20 plus 30 plus 40, which lead to the 90 marks of this exam. Okay, so now let's get into section A. First thing to remember, you should spend 35 minutes on this section. That's essential. That's what it also says on the exam paper. You should spend 35 minutes on this section. Only 35 minutes, otherwise your time management will go haywire. Next, of course, as we saw previously, it consists of 20 marks in total, and then only 1 unseen poem must be analyzed. So you'll be given 1 poem which you've never seen before, which is why it's unseen, and you must analyze it and answer the question that's given, and we'll look at that in a moment. Lastly, section A assesses AO2 only. If you don't know what AO2 is, it stands for Assessment Objective 2, and this is what it is. Analyze the language, form, and structure used by a writer to create meanings and effects. So this is what AO2 is. This is what you are going to be assessed on. So you have to be able to you have to be able to analyze the language, form, and structure of the poem and how it creates meanings, how it conveys a message, and what effect it has on the reader, and so on. Okay, so now let's look at an example unseen poetry question. This one is from the sample assessment material, which is linked down below in the description. So let's just read this one right away. Explore how the writer presents the geography teacher in this poem. In your answer, you should consider the poet's descriptive skills, choice of language, use of structure, and form. Support your answer with examples from the poem. So before this question, the poem will be given, and you have to read it, of course, make annotations on the side if you can. And then this is the ultimate question. You have to, of course, look at the poet's descriptive skills, choice of language, and use of structure and form, and then analyze the poem and show how the writer presents the geography teacher. So there's always a keyword in these types of questions. As you can see, the keyword or the main thing to focus on in this question is how the writer presents the geography teacher. That's what you have to focus on. You don't have to analyze the poem in general. No, that's one mistake which many students make. You have to focus on the keyword or the main thing that the question is trying to ask you, which is how the writer presents the geography teacher, nothing else. So yeah, that's for 20 marks in total, and let's move on to section B. Okay, so the first thing to remember about section B is to spend 40 minutes on it. Once again, this is essential for time management. Next, it consists of 30 marks, as you saw previously. Thirdly, it asks you to compare two anthology poems. So you will get a question which will mention two poems, and you'll have to compare those two. You have to basically compare poems in this section, and the poems will be part of a list which you will previously have analyzed already in class and stuff, and this list is the same for anyone who's giving the Edexcel International GCSE English Literature exam, and it's right over here. These are the list of poems which everyone has to know like really well, what type of poem it is, how many stanzas are in it, who it's written by, the contexts at times, and so on. So I'll just read these out quickly, and if you want you can take a screenshot for reference. These are also probably going to be included in your anthology book if you have that. Okay, so If by Rudyard Kipling, Prayer Before Birth by Louis MacNeice, Blessing by Imtiaz Tharkar, Search for My Tongue by Sujata Bhatt, Half Past Two by U.A. Fanthorpe, Piano by D.H. Lawrence, Hide and Seek by Vernon Scannell, Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy by John Keats, Poem at 39 by Alice Walker, War Photographer by Carol Ann Duffy, The Tiger by William Blake, My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, Half Caste by John Aggard, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas, and Remember by Christina Rossetti. So these are 16 poems, I believe, which I also had to learn, but due to COVID-19 and the whole pandemic situation, I did not have to give this part of the literature exam. So yeah, but I think whoever's going to give it in the future will have to sit this section, but I'm not sure. You should confirm with your teachers. Anyway, moving on, the last thing to remember is that there's also a choice of two questions. So you have to compare two poems, but there's a choice of two questions. So there will be 4 poems mentioned. Okay, this is getting confusing. Let's just move on to the next section. Yeah, so over here, we're going to look at an example anthology poetry question like we did for the unseen poetry one. This is also from the sample assessment material. So as you can see here, there is a choice of 2 questions because it says either or. So yeah, that shows that you can either do one question or the other. There's a choice of 2. Now in one question, you have to compare 2 poems. So look what it says here. It says reread Blessing and War Photographer. Now the reason it says this is because the anthology poem booklet will be allowed to take into the exam, so you can take the booklet into the exam. I'm not sure, some centers might allow you to take your own booklet, but most usually have a copy which they give you. So yeah, it depends, but you have to reread Blessing and War Photographer from the available booklet, and then compare the ways the writers present powerful images in Blessing and War Photographer. You should make reference to language, form, and structure. Support your answer with examples from the poems. So yeah, that's the question, sample question for anthology poetry for section B, and in total it is for 30 marks. Also, section B assesses AO2 and AO3. The previous one only assessed AO2, but this one assesses AO3 as well. So let's just read both of them again. AO2 means that the student has to analyze language, form, and structure used by a writer to create meanings and effects. And AO3 means you have to explore links and connections between texts. And it makes sense that AO3 is assessed over here because the question is asking you to compare 2 poems, hence links and connections between text. So I hope you understand so far. You can take a screenshot once again or save this video to a playlist. Okay, moving on, let's go to section C. First thing, once again, to remember about section C is to spend 45 minutes. This one is the one you have to spend the most time on because you have a longer question to answer, in the sense that you have to answer a question which is based on a novel, which is, of course, longer than poems. Next, this section consists of 40 marks in total. Thirdly, it asks you to answer for one modern prose text. And over here, I'm going to finally tell you what are the choices of modern prose texts and which one I did. So this is a list, and your school will be doing one of these if you're doing Edexcel iGCSE literature. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, The Whale Rider by Witty Ehimera, I think so, The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Okay. Yeah, so what I did at my school was Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and it's a very sad story, but anyway, that's what we did, and I've heard that most people do To Kill a Mockingbird, but I'm not sure. So it depends on which school you go to, which text you're doing. You have to basically answer on one of these. You only answer for one of these, the same way I only did for Of Mice and Men. Moving on, there is also another choice of 2 questions for this section as well, so you get 2 questions from which to choose from once again, which is quite handy. And the reason it says for each text, it means that for Of Mice and Men, if you're doing Of Mice and Men, then you'll have a choice of 2 questions for Of Mice and Men. If you're doing To Kill a Mockingbird, you'll have 2 questions to choose from for that as well. And let's just look at an example right now. Of course, as you can see, a choice of 2 questions is made clear by the usage of either and or. You can do either one question or the other. And let's just read the question quickly. Explore the character of Jem in the novel. This is a To Kill a Mockingbird question. Explore the character of Jem in the novel. You must consider the context of the novel in your answer. And the total marks for this question is 40. Compared to the previous questions, this is a short question, but the answer is longer, obviously, since it's for 40 marks. And this part of the exam, this part of paper 1, section C, assesses AO1 and AO4. So these 2 AOs are ones that we haven't read about before, so please pay attention and listen. I sound like a teacher. Anyway, AO1, demonstrate a close knowledge and understanding of text, maintaining a critical style and presenting an informed personal engagement. So what this means is that you have to closely analyze each quote and part of text, each description and things like that, and make a critical judgment on like what the writer is trying to convey, and how you feel engaged by the text and how readers would feel when reading it, and so on. And then AO4, show understanding of the relationships between texts and the context in which they were written. So this is the bit which is very important. AO4 is the most important. It means that you should write about the context in which this book was written, and you should mention it throughout your answer and link it to the question. So when they say explore the character of Jem, and as you can see below, it says you must consider the context of the novel in your answer. This means that you have to keep in mind that the Great Depression was there at that time, if I'm not wrong. Okay, I'm having second guesses about this, but I think the Great Depression was there, or was that? I think that was Of Mice and Men. Yeah, no, sorry, it was about racism, yeah. So the context of the novel would be that there was a lot of racism at that time and so on, and how, other people were treated compared to whites and so on. And, you have to show the relationship between To Kill a Mockingbird and the context in which it was written and so on. And yeah, so you have to keep in mind never to forget about AO4 because, if you do, you will lose out on marks. Okay, so we're done with paper 1. Let's get on to paper 2. So first of all, as always, we're going to look at the code of the paper, which is 4ET1/02. Next, this paper is for 60 marks, lesser than the previous one, which was 90 marks. So this one is 60 marks, and it constitutes for 40% of the iGCSE. As you can see, paper 1 weighs more in your total Literature iGCSE. Nevertheless, it's important to pay attention to this paper and prepare for it equally well. This paper lasts for 1 hour 30 minutes, also lesser than the previous paper. Lastly, the paper is called Modern Drama and Literary Heritage Texts, which is what will be assessed. Next, we move on to the sections of the paper as usual. There are 2 sections in this paper. The first one, Section A, assesses modern drama. You have to write an essay on a modern drama text from a choice of 2 questions, as always, and this section is for 30 marks. The next section, Section B, assesses a literary heritage text. You have to write an essay on one of those from a choice of 2 questions, and this one is also for 30 marks, and in total both Section A and Section B add up to the 60 marks of this paper. So let's look into detail at Section A first. So to start off, you have to spend 45 minutes on this section. And next, as we saw, it consists of 30 marks. Thirdly, one modern drama will be assessed from a list of set text. So you have a list of text from which you choose, you don't choose, from which your school chooses one modern drama, which you will be doing. You don't do all of them. So this is the list of modern dramas, and you will probably be doing one of these. The most popular is An Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley, which is what I did as well. So I'll just read all of them quickly. A View from the Bridge by Arthur Miller, An Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon, Kinder Transport by Diane Samuels, Death and the King's Horseman by Wole Soyinka. Right, so those are the set texts, and your school will do one of those. I did An Inspector Calls, as I said, so I had to answer a question on that in this section. And once again, there is a choice of 2 questions, so there will be 2 questions for each text. So for An Inspector Calls, I had a choice of 2 questions, and moving on, let's look at the question. So this is from the sample assessment material, which is once again linked below in the description. The use of either and or over here in the paper clearly shows that you have a choice of 2 questions. You don't have to answer both. You can choose to answer either one or the other. So I'll just read this question of An Inspector Calls. Inspector, quote, "There will be plenty of time when I am gone for you all to adjust your family relationships," quote end. Explore the significance of family relationships in An Inspector Calls. You must consider language, form, and structure in your answer. So over here, there is a quotation of a character in the drama, and then the question, which is to explore the significance of family relationships. And the key word being here is the significance of family relationships, which is what you have to focus on throughout your entire essay. And of course, you must consider language, form, and structure as always. The total for this question is 30 marks. And this section assesses AO1 and AO2. We looked at these before, so I'll just read them again quickly if you've forgotten. AO1 is basically for the student to demonstrate a close knowledge and understanding of the text, maintaining a critical style, and presenting an informed personal engagement. AO2 is to analyze the language, form, and structure, which is also mentioned in the question, used by a writer to create meanings and effects. Okay, so moving on, let's look at Section B. Before we start on Section B, I just want to remind anyone who's watching to check out my page on Buy Me a Coffee to support me with $1, or go ahead and buy some of my iGCSE resources like notes, flashcards, and exemplar answers. You'll find my literature exemplar answers for my 2021 exam as well over there, so you should check that out if you're interested. And so let's continue. First of all, the first thing to remember about Section B is to spend 45 minutes on it. So in this paper, you equally divide the time you spend on the sections. Section A, 45 minutes, Section B, 45 minutes as well, and then in total, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Then, of course, this section consists of 30 marks in total. You have to analyze one literary heritage text from a list of set texts, and as usual, here is the list of texts. I'll read them out quickly. Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, Macbeth by William Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So the most popular over here is usually Shakespeare's texts, which are Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and The Merchant of Venice. But I think the most popular is Macbeth. I've heard like many schools in the UK, all across like many countries do Macbeth for literature, despite or in spite of whatever exam board they study for. So I also did Macbeth, and it was pretty hard to do, but anyway, yeah, so Macbeth is the most popular, and that's what I did. Once again, only one text from the list of given texts. Okay, so I answered for Macbeth in this section, and I answered from a choice of 2 questions. Once again, let's quickly look at the example from the sample assessment material. This is a question from Shakespeare. Once again, either and or shows that there is a choice of 2 questions. You can either answer one question on Macbeth or another similar question on Macbeth. You have a choice. Don't answer both. Okay, so let's read the question. Explore the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. You must consider language, form, and structure, and refer to the context of the play in your answer. So when you read a question, it's very important to pay attention to every word, because as you can see in the second line, it mentions that you have to refer to the context of the play. Now, in quickly reading the question in your exam, you might skim over the second line and just read the first line, which you may think is the main thing, but you have to read the second line to remind yourself that you not only have to write about quotes, and explain them, similes, metaphors. Not only that, but also the context of the play, which is AO4. And we'll look at that over here. So yeah, this section assesses AO1, AO2, and AO4. So basically, this section can be said to be the most important from paper 1 because it assesses 3 AOs, 3 assessment objectives. The first 2 we just read a while ago, so I'm not going to reread them, but AO4 being the most important, and the one you should remember the most once you watch this video and end it, is AO4, so I'm going to read it. Show understanding of the relationships between texts and the context in which they were written. Very important. Really, really important. The reason I'm saying this again and again is because that's what our teacher used to keep saying. AO4 is what most students lose marks on. And yeah, it is a bit hard to include AO4 points in your answer, but you should try to do it as best as you can. So yeah, that's it. That's all. That was paper 1 and paper 2 of English literature. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please go ahead and share it with your friends, family, and whoever you think might benefit from it.